Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in for another episode of Jay-Z's Reptiles. It's that time of year where, a lot of the YouTube personalities and a lot of people posting right now are posting pictures and video and talking about breeding snakes, and including myself. So maybe you guys out there are watching this right now and you go, I would really like to breed some snakes. Well, there's a little bit more that goes into it than that. I did a couple videos last year that kind of touched on it a bit, but I want to talk a little bit more specifically about maybe 5 things you should really think about before you decide to breed reptiles. I'm Jay-Z, here we go. So the first thing and foremost is, okay, I decided I want to breed reptiles. Number 1, make sure you like whatever species you decide to breed. So if you love boa constrictors, breed boa constrictors. If you love bearded dragons, leopard geckos, banded geckos, rhino rat snakes, black-headed pythons, whatever it is, make sure that you really love the animal that it is that you want to breed, not necessarily the dollar value for it. I really, really like some of the pine snakes, the northern pines, the southerns, and even the Louisiana pine snakes, because of the animal that it is. Not necessarily they have a really high value to them. In fact, the Louisiana pine snakes, I can't even ship out of state without a special permit that I have to get from Fish and Wildlife. And even then, they don't really ever bring in more than a couple $100. But I still really love the snake, and I love to be part of something that, is really important and cool to me. So, whatever it is that you like to breed, pick that species and go from there. The next thing is make sure that, whatever project, and I say project, so whatever you decide to breed that you really like, go for that. So what I mean by that is most people, when we decide to breed reptiles, we're breeding for something specific. So, with ball pythons, for instance, because that's a pretty obvious one, we're breeding for morphs. Either a certain look that they combine like the leucistic animals for certain combinations, or just stacking as many genes and morphs into there as we possibly can. There's nothing wrong with that. Ball pythons are honestly a really good reptile species. I like ball pythons. I get that, they have the reputation for being a pet rock, but there's a really good niche for them in the reptile community. They're great beginner reptiles to get people interested in them. I love all the genetics behind it. I get to play Dr. Frankenstein with it a little bit, so there's nothing wrong with that. But say you really, really like really pink or really orange animals. You can line breed, and by that I mean is what people have been doing for centuries, even with dogs or whatever else. That's where you take the animal that has the orangest look to it, and then you breed it to another really orange animal, and you continue to breed the most orange animals to get a super, super really clean, bright orange animal. We've done it in multiple things. So in corn snakes, there are the corals, which is just one exact line of a male that's just super pink. There are the 2 different lines of Call albino, which Roe here is. There's the lipstick, and then there's the coral of the Call albinos. The lipsticks, they're a little bit brighter. They have a little bit cleaner lines. The corals, which is Roe, has a lot of pink on them, and that kind of fades as they get older. But you can really see that he has a lot of really high pink up and down his sides and on his face, and I want to breed the pinkest coral albino albinos as I can, which is why I have his sister Pi, the Sunglow, and I'm going to, pair him up with other animals down the road to hopefully bring out the most pink animals there are. The other one that people do, which has been done for quite a while and is starting to come a little bit more into vogue as of late, which is breeding specifically for localities, bloodlines, and specific species. And so what I mean by that is, so for instance, because I have a boa constrictor, I'll start with that. There are 2 main species that we keep here in the hobby. That's the constrictors and the imperators, and those are 2 separate species. There were a subspecies at one point a couple of years ago, but they're 2 separate ones. In the constrictor species, there are quite a few subspecies, and of those, there are specific localities or areas where they look a little bit different and bloodlines to them. So say, I really like the Call albino, as I said before, and I want to breed the really pink ones of those. But I also really like a certain bloodline of the Suriname locality boa constrictor constrictors. And so I want to get animals of those particular bloodlines with those things and breed them together to keep the species pure or what that means is there's no other species or other strains bred into them, and to continue with that look that I really like, as well as, I also like the northern pine snakes. Those are really cool. And throughout their geographic range, they kind of have different looks. I really like the high white, really pure white, black, and white animals. I keep saying white, sorry. And those, a lot of the time, come from the kind of New Jersey Pine Barrens areas. And so I'm starting to amass a small group of New Jersey, like Ocean County of New Jersey locality northern pine snakes. And so whatever project you decide to breed in, number one, that doesn't necessarily make you better than anybody else because you want to breed purely locality or you want to breed the most expensive animal. Whatever it is that you choose to breed, as long as you're passionate about it, as long as you're doing it correctly, good on you. That's the best thing that you can do, and that doesn't necessarily make you better or worse than somebody out there who's super successful at breeding ball pythons and can get 9-10 gene animals, and you're breeding locality specific corn snakes. There's nothing wrong with that, and that is great. We need all of that in the hobby. The next thing to think about is, okay, you've decided I really want to breed really thick-banded Okatee corn snakes. I really like corn snakes. That's the project I want to get. Make sure you already know how to take care of them properly. You've done all of your research about not only how to care for them, so you've kept them a number of years, you've learned how to cycle them properly, you understand their biology, their temps, their cooling, their humidity, all of that, as well as you've done research into other breeders of how they bred them. So wherever they are, okay, this breeder from Texas, he broodmates them for 6 weeks, and from, the beginning of December into February. Then he brings them up, starts to warm them up. Okay, cool. But this other corn snake breeder in Minnesota puts them down in the end of October and brings them up the middle of February because where they live, that seems to work a little bit better for them. So make sure you do your research, no matter who it is, what type of animal you're doing. Like ball pythons, they don't necessarily brumate, but some people cool them down. You can stimulate them by feeding them heavier or leaner and other different things. Same with boa constrictors, reticulate pythons, whatever. Sorry, I keep mostly talking about snakes because I really know more about snakes than I do most species of lizard. I'm learning more about lizards every day too, so yeah. So, but that's what I really mean is that make sure you've done your research and you really know how to, not only keep the animal to stimulate it for breeding purposes, whatever it is, if it's a colubrid brumation and things like that, or it's cycling with humidity and amounts of feed for a more tropical species like a boa or a python, as well as just keeping the animal very healthy from, a year-to-year basis. And then the last thing that I really want to talk about are kind of, and I know it sounds negative, and I hate to end on a negative, but it's for the best. You'll see where I'm going with this, is kind of the consequences of breeding. And so what I mean by that is sometimes it doesn't always go the way you want it to. So, we'll start off with the worst. So several breeders in the past have told me the fastest way to kill your animal is to breed it. And that sounds absolutely horrendous, but what he was really trying to say with, a jaded veteran, line of thinking was a lot can go wrong with breeding, everyone. I mean, if it's a snake that can produce eggs, they can egg bind. And what that is where the eggs will actually not be able to pass out of the cloacal and they'll get stuck inside of the female, sometimes requiring surgery and shots and all these other procedures. And that can very rapidly decline an animal's health. If it's an animal that's vivarious, like this little girl boa constrictor here, sometimes, it just doesn't work out for the live births. Sometimes they never fully recover and they never really bounce back well. And if you're lucky, then you just have a really cool pet. And if not, sometimes you lose your animals, which is horrible to say. But that's one thing about that. Sometimes males, they'll go off of feeding because their drive to breed is so strong that they never really fully recover either. But, say that everything does go really well. You breed your pastel het clown to your lesser pastel visual clown, and you get super pastel lesser clown. You hit that number. Out of your 7 eggs, you hit 1. But 4 of them are just normals or a pastel. And yeah, they're het clown, but they just look normal or pastel. So what do you do with those babies that don't sell immediately or that you don't want to hold on to? You have to think about what you're going to do with those babies long term if you can't move them right away. And I understand that there's, kind of a bit of a negative mentality about sending animals and things like that, but, make sure you do your research on who you're going to sell your animal to. If they've done their research, you give them a little interview, whatever that is. And maybe I'll do a whole video about, so, you've produced snakes, now who are you going to sell them to? What are some things to think about like that? But, just there are a lot of things that you need to think about. So, this last year, the 2020 spring season, we produced a number of clutches and we had over 40 ball pythons. But we couldn't sell all of them. I'm still sitting on about 6 right now, but for different reasons. Either they were problem feeders, which is another thing you have to think about if they're not thriving right away, or they're just morphs, or they just have the wild pattern that isn't as popular or interesting to people. And so you have to think about, okay, this is an animal that I have to remember until I can find a good home for it, that I have to house, that I have to heat, that I have to clean, that I have to feed. And so all that comes into that, which is why I really say that breeding reptiles, and honestly specifically snakes, it's a passion, it's a hobby more than an actual business. If you can actually make it a viable, successful business, then good on you. That's what we all want to do. Where are you going, Ro? Where are you going, boy? But it's make sure you're really passionate about it. And that's really what I want to bring around and really get through to this. It's, it doesn't matter what you decide to breed. As long as you're passionate about it and you're fully invested and you really know what you are getting into, you've done your research, you know what can happen, you've talked to people, but you still really like it, and that's what you want to do. I'm not trying to dissuade anyone from breeding reptiles. I think it's really cool. I think it's amazing that there are so many people out there, because our hobby is still growing, that want to breed so many different animals, even inside of the same animal. The boa imperator, they're more than just morphs. They have localities. There's the Hog Islands, which are a very specific one, and if you can get your hands on a pure-blooded, non-mutt Hog Island boa, that's really cool. But they also have the bloods and the several different types of albinos and everything like that, which is really cool. And that's really amazing. That I love that the fact that the hobby is doing that. So that's all I really want to say, is just talk a little bit about that. So, with everybody, and he's up in the clock. With everybody talking about breeding snakes and everything like that, and you decide you wanted to, and you decide you want to do it too, just make sure you do your research, give a little bit of forethought, and remember, just be nice and kind to everybody else around you. If someone's reaching out to you, if you're a reptile breeder, and they want to know that, be nice to the newbies coming into the hobby. And if you are a newbie, make sure you're really polite to the person you're asking to, and really take their experiences and their advice to heart. Not necessarily do exactly what they do, because what works for them may not necessarily work for you, but really, heed their advice, because they have done it. And honestly, they do want you to succeed too, because they want this hobby and industry to grow right along, and you're the next step in the next generation of that, whether you're 8 or 18 or 80. So, hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any ideas for future videos, or you thought I missed something or really liked it, let me know down in the comments. Hit me up, jzsreptiles@gmail.com. All of that good jazz, social media. Plans for breeding snakes coming up soon. I'll be sure to let you know. Make sure to check out the podcast. Keep Calm, it's just a snake podcast. If you know anybody that might be interested, or you might be interested in that too, let me know down. Private message me on Facebook, email me, all that jazz. Hope you're having a great day, and we'll check you next time.